kept blowing out the matches before they reached the wicks, and when a lit match did manage to reach them, the wind would blow out either the match, some of the flames before the wicks were lit. Nandakumar tried again and again to shield matches and wicks with one hand while lighting with the other hand, but he just couldn't manage to do it. Prabhupada to the rescue. Watching the futile exercise, Prabhupada urged Nandakumar to execute the task. One or two other devotees came forward to help, but they too were unsuccessful. Finally, in a mood of resignation, born of frustration, but with profound spiritualization, Prabhupada uttered, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nastyeva nastyatiranyata, gives the translation. We all knew how seriously Prabhupada took deity worship. He understood that the deity was Krishna, the Supreme Personality God himself, and he was strict that his followers maintain the proper standard of worship as defined for us by Guru and Shastra. Still in Kali Yuga, ultimately, Hare Nama eva kevalam. And in reading from his volume with Sanskrit commentaries, Prabhupada had begun speaking on the history of Ajamila, glorifying the holy name. Later, when his translation of the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam was published, we found the same conclusions that he had presented to us then. Quote, Prabhupada's purport 6.3.25. Especially in this age of Kali, Sankirtan alone is sufficient. If members of our temples in the different parts of the world simply continue Sankirtan before the deity, especially before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, will remain perfect. There is no need of any other performances. Never keep oneself clean in habits and mind. Deity worship and other regular principles are required. Srila Jiva Goswami says, though Sankirtan is sufficient for the perfection of life, the archana or deity worship of the deity temple must continue in order that the devotees stay clean and pure. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore recommended, when follow both processes simultaneously, we strictly follow the principles performing deity worship and Sankirtan along parallel lines. This we should continue. That's from a purport. From the Ardha Kumbh Mela, we traveled with Prabhupada to Gorakhpur. There, first time I took the opportunity to go to the newspapers and magazines to persuade them to publish articles about Prabhupada's visit and about Krishna consciousness in general. Enlivened in my service, I mentioned my efforts to Prabhupada on a morning walk. You are a very good public relations man, he responded, which made me feel elated. After a while, the discussion turned to humility, and I remarked that sometimes I felt that I wasn't really doing anything for Krishna or Krishna consciousness. That is, Prabhupada responded, that feeling is humbleness. Then Giriraj replies, but sometimes that feeling is turned into Maya. I added, meaning that times I felt discouraged about myself or lost my enthusiasm to preach. Prabhupada stopped walking and looked me straight in the eyes. Turned into Maya? He asked. You are always in Maya. His words hit me hard. As he and the other devotees continued their walk, I placed my forehead on the ground in obeisance. By Srila Prabhupada's mercy, I understood my actual position and had gained a glimpse of his position as my spiritual master. He not only spoke about the importance of humility, also knew how to humble us, all for our benefit. In Gorakhpur, Prabhupada instructed me to write as my first business, quote unquote. See that books are accepted in the universities by the scholarly class, he also told me. Then he asked, do you ever think of getting married? No, I replied. But after a moment, I added, the only time I ever thought of getting was when I saw that all the GBCs were getting married. You'll never be GBC, Prabhupada said. It is best to avoid marriage. Sex desire is like an itch. You have an itch and you scratch it, it just becomes worse. Similarly, desire is there, and if you try to satisfy it, it becomes worse. So it is better to tolerate not only sex desire, all the demands of the senses, eating and sleeping also better to tolerate. So you remain brahmachari, and after 2 or 3 years, I will give you sannyas. In a matter of 20 minutes, Srila Prabhupada had given me my whole life's program in Krishna consciousness. Okay. From Gorakhpur, a small Sankirtan party led by Hans went by train to Agra and Aligarh, where we received a telegram from Prabhupada calling us to Bombay for a big pandal program. In Bombay, everyone knew about the program, scheduled over 11 days, March 25 through April 4, entitled Bhagavad Discourses, a Hare Krishna festival, featuring world preachers of Bhakti cult, his world preacher of Bhakti cult, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, to be held across. Now, is it properly pronounced Maidan? Because that's how it's spelled. M-A-I, Maidan, 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 Maidan. Accent on the first or the second syllable. Maidan. Downtown. As a climax to the publicity, Shamsundar had fixed a giant balloon to the site, announcing from high over the city, Hare Krishna, cross Maidan. 20,000 people attended daily. 30,000 on weekends. Strongly, and people responded favorably. One he performed initiations and the wedding of Vegavan Das from Sweden and Padmavati from Australia with a full Vedic fire ceremony. This is the real United Nations, he declared, and the entire audience, 2,000 people, clapped and cheered. Madhu Dvisa was in charge of the stage program. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the general manager, and he made me the Pandal temple commander, putting all the responsibility and work on my shoulders. So I was at the Pandal all afternoon while the other devotees were back at our rented premises, a temple and ashram, and the Akash Ganga with Srila Prabhupada. Nobody stayed to help, and I didn't know what to do. Prabhupada would come in the day, and before going on the stage for the program, sit behind it in one of the several rooms formed with cloth attached to bamboo poles. One afternoon came, the room was a mess. The rented sofas were out of place, used dirty cups were left around, and the tables had not been dusted or washed. As I was practically the only devotee there, Prabhupada asked me, why is everything so dirty? I don't have anyone to help me, I replied. I have to do everything myself. Prabhupada looked at me and said but firmly, it is better to control 5 asses than to work an ass yourself. In addition to her general duties, I was responsible for the book table, actually, several long wooden tables placed together in a line. I knew from distributing magazines in Boston that the crucial point was to put the literature in the hands of the potential customers. They would hold and page through it, glancing at the pictures and text, and become attached to it, and then I would ask for a donation. I tried the same approach at the Pandal, but I was dismayed to find that people would simply walk with the magazine without paying anything. I explained the situation to our advisor, Sadaji Watlao, And he told me, "Oh, you can't do that here." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "You have to poke a hole through the corner of the magazine and thread a string through it and tie the string to the legs of the tables," he said. "Then people can hold the magazine but won't be able to off with it." It seemed like a great solution, so I decided to try it. There was a young American man with matted hair, wearing faded white cloth, whom I noticed around the pandal. When I asked him if he would like to do some service, he agreed and took up the job of poking holes in magazines and attaching them to the tables. At the start of the evening program, I suggested to him, "Why don't you sit in the audience and hear the lecture?" And when Prabhupada spotted the boy at the back of the crowd, he had Guru Das bring him onto the stage. Every now and then, Prabhupada would look at me, the young man remembered. And something never happened took place in my heart. I was thinking, that's Radhanath Maharaj. Yeah. This is my eternal Father and spiritual master, but my mind rejected it. You should not accept just one man. You should learn from everyone. Heart was saying, no, this is your Guru. Can't you see? You should surrender. And while I was going through this intense inner conflict during his lecture, Prabhupada looked right at me. He stopped speaking for a few seconds, my eyes so serious, and I could actually hear his eyes speaking. Give up your nonsense and surrender. After the lecture, as Prabhupada was leaving the stage, he affectionately rubbed my head and smiled and said, "You come up and sit with us every night, and every morning too." So I did that. And almost exactly 2 years later, the young man accepted Prabhupada as his spiritual master and was initiated by him, by Radhanath Das, later to become Radhanath Swami. On the last day of the program Prabhupada about devotees and the movement, and invited his audience to join. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I thank you very much for kindly participating in today's meeting. We are practically all over the world as the Hare Krishna people. Wherever we go, they immediately recognize us as the Hare Krishna people. So I'll try to speak something about the Hare Krishna people. I started this movement in New York. I went there in 1965, and from here I had no shelter, not any means to maintain myself. I had some books on Srimad Bhagavatam, and some way or other I pulled on. In 1966, I started this movement after in New York under the state religious act, began to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in the park in New York, Tompkins Square. And these young boys and girls began to assemble and chant and dance. This was the beginning. And when one poet, perhaps you know him, Mr. Allen Ginsberg, he was coming and joined with us. In this week, first of all, we started our center in New York, 2nd Avenue, and then gradually expanded to San Francisco, Montreal, Boston, Buffalo, and Los Angeles. Now we have got 52 branches all over the world, including one in Tokyo, one in Hong Kong, one in Sydney, Australia. Now, try to understand, what is this Hare Krishna movement? This Hare Krishna movement was started recently, about 500 years ago, by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He appeared in Bing district of Nadia, about 60 miles north of Calcutta, and he started this movement. Of course, it is not to be understood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started something new. No, it was the oldest, in the sense that 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna spoke about this same Krishna's movement in Bhagavad Gita. And if we go further, then from the statement of Bhagavad, we understand that it was started 40 million years ago. Prabhupada spoke at length about the science of Krishna, and he concluded. Now, what is this Krishna consciousness movement? Krishna consciousness movement means the essence of all religious principles. What is religious principle? Religious principle means to abide by the laws given by God. That is called religious principle. Simple word. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranita. Dharma means the codes of the laws given by God. That is Dharma or religion. This is a long subject matter. It's not possible to explain everything. That is the Krishna consciousness movement. But the actual fact is, this Krishna consciousness movement to bring one to his original consciousness. That is the sum and substance. That original consciousness can be achieved by a simple method. What is that? Chanting this: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That is a fact. Just like we have got some European American boys and girls. How have they come to this platform? How have they given up their old habits? Naturally, these boys and girls were taught from the beginning of their life things which are not accepted in Vedic civilization, but they have now given them. There is no illicit sex life among our students. There is no meat eating. There is no intoxication, including coffee and tea and cigarettes, and there is no gambling. And they are practiced to chanting Hare Krishna mantra. And you have seen some of the samples. We have got 52 branches. In every branch, we've got not less than 25 devotees, up to 100. So this is the Brahma Buddhist. This is not story, it is fact. How it is attained by Krishna consciousness. This Krishna consciousness movement is neither a new movement, nor is it a concocted philosophy. It is authorities such as Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literature, and practically you see how it is effective. Simply by chanting this Hare Krishna mantra, these boys and girls have become elevated and the matter very seriously. They are preaching this cult all over the world. Our request to everyone is, whatever you are doing, it doesn't matter. Please take to this chanting of Hare Krishna mantra. That is our only request. You will not lose anything, but you will gain simply by chanting. It will cleanse your heart. I do not wish to take much more of your time. This Hare Krishna movement is very nice, authorized, spiritual, simple, and sublime, all at a time. If you kindly take this, you'll be benefited and your life will be successful. Thank you. After the Pandal program, Prabhupada revealed his desire to establish a permanent center in Bombay for training the distribution of books and he wrote an open letter to our supporters, quote, "My plan is to establish in this most auspicious city unique international Krishna conscious training center where hundreds of persons from abroad may be educated in the Vedic life, while at the same time Indian boys and girls may be trained up for prachar, work in foreign countries. We will construct classrooms, workrooms, dormitories for large-scale public prasad distribution, a lecture hall, a library, a beautiful temple, glorification of Radha and Krishna. We are on the threshold of bringing this important project to fruition and are very excited to inform you about the progress made in this respect. Your active participation and your direct involvement in this most essential, and hence I appeal to you to spare your valuable time for Krishna and make it a point, in spite of your extremely busy life, to extend your unstinted cooperation. It is proposed to discuss and finalize plans to channel our united energies to achieve this goal. It will be a great opportunity for like-minded Krishna devotees to meet, to have darshan of the deities, and to exchange views and suggestions to make rapid spiritual life. I very much want to meet you again. Break. Building on the success of the Bombay Pandal, Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna and me to arrange a similar program in Calcutta. And a few days later, the two of us embarked on the long train ride. Our temple in Calcutta was in a large rented house in an aristocratic area in the south central part of the city, near Kamak Street, overlooking a square man-made pond, surrounded by a park. One night, after the other devotees had gone to sleep, Tamal Krishna and I were still awake talking on the balcony. Srila Prabhupada had a few, including himself, Tamal Krishna said, with whom he was especially close and in whom he confided. This was a revelation to me. I had never before distinguished among the senior devotees. I saw them all as my superiors, as devotees whom Prabhupada loved, and I did not make any further distinctions. Tamal Krishna glorified Shamsundar, saying he was one of the biggest in the movement. What do you mean, one of the biggest? I asked. I don't think I have ever heard him give class. Preaching doesn't just mean speaking about Krishna, he replied. Preaching ultimately means engaging people in Krishna's service. Shamsundar was the one who had conceived of the Bombay pandal and organized all in its execution. He had been instrumental in developing the Life membership program and had designed the membership form and written a brilliant appeal, the best I'd ever seen. But the whole time I was working with him, I had never seen him give a class or address the public. Tamal Krishna explained that through activities such as developing the Life membership program in Pandal, and through so many other efforts, Shamsundar had engaged thousands of people in Krishna consciousness, and that those too were preaching. This was for me an important instruction. Then, returning to his relationship with Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna told me about an incident in 1970 when Prabhupada felt that some of his disciples were trying to wrest control of the movement from him, and how Prabhupada had called him to us and confided in him. Some of the temple leaders were preoccupied with collecting money and were engaging devotees to collect even more when it was at the expense of their other devotional practices. And the spiritual lives of the devotees were being hampered. When Prabhupada had become aware of what was happening, he had discussed with Tamal what to do. And they arrived at ways to reform the situation. For the first time, I understood how much Prabhupada valued him as a confidant and trusted him to help make decisions. The essence of spiritual life, Tamal Krishna told me, is service to the spiritual master. Paragraph. That's one paragraph. That point really impressed me and entered deep. We chanted the holy names, read the scriptures, worshipped the deities, and rendered service. That much I knew, but the essence of spirit being service to the spiritual master, I had never thought of that. The process of bhakti yoga was all there, and I knew we had to follow all of it, but I did not see the different practices related to each other. And Tamal Krishna's realization, which I accepted, was that service to the spiritual master was the essence. From then on, my approach to devotional service, even chanting, changed. I still liked to chant, but I began to chant more in the mood of service to Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes when we were in Calcutta, Tamal Krishna would get annoyed because I would go out for preaching until I had finished at least 12 rounds. I wouldn't want to go out for preaching until I had finished at least 12 rounds. Oh, you just want to avoid work, he would say. That's why you're standing in front of the deities and chanting. Still, he let me. Sometimes he would get more than other times, but he let me because I needed that. But now my mood was a little different. Yes, I was chanting, but now I was also thinking, I need to chant to do my duties for Prabhupada. If I chant, my consciousness will be purified. Krishna will guide me what to do, and I would be better to deal with people. I'll be able to preach more effectively if I chant and purify my consciousness. After the Calcutta Pandal, devotees from throughout India gathered in New Delhi for the first Pandal program there, a big 10-day festival in November. at the prominent and prestigious LIC grounds near Connaught Place downtown. As in Bombay and Calcutta, tens of thousands came daily, and as a new special feature, every evening a distinguished person was invited as a chief guest and spoke before Prabhupada, and in his talk, Prabhupada would often directly or indirectly address statements the person had made. Among the guest speakers were Hanraj Gupta, the mayor, Hari Vansh Bachchan, a respected Hindi poet, Sham Charan Gupta, the chairman of the Delhi Metropolitan Council, C.B. Agarwal, a famous orator, Bipin Chandra Mishra, a judge of the Delhi High Court, Dr. Atma Ram, a renowned scientist, Colonel B.R. Mohan, and L.N. Sakalani, prominent naturalists, Adityanath Jha, the lieutenant governor, Jagjivan Ram, the Indian defense minister, and James George, the Canadian High Commissioner. It was quite an illustrious group. Many political leaders came forward to help and support us, and they were visible at the pandal and often made announcements from the stage. As one devotee pointed out to Prabhupada, the politicians were not selfless in their service. They were hoping to get votes from the pious Hindus in attendance, but was not phased. If they take advantage of us and we don't lose, he said, then we don't mind. We are not envious. The deities at the pandal were white marble Sri Radhaganda and were later sent to Bhaktivedanta Manor outside London. With help from experts in Vrindavan, Yamuna made the most spectacular outfits, and all the guests and devotees were thrilled by the new standard of worship she set. The first night's outfit was dazzling, with shiny gold sequins on opulent white cloth. And Prabhupada's old friend Jai Dayal Dalmia, one of India's leading industrial philanthropists, came onto the stage at a quiet time and just knelt before the deities, gazing at their divine beauty. From Delhi, Prabhupada planned to proceed to Vrindavan, and all the devotees were excited accompanying him, but he had also received an invitation to visit Madras, and he wanted some disciples to go there in his stead. Although none of us could sing being in Vrindavan with Prabhupada, Achyutananda Bhavananda and I volunteered to go to Madras, accompanied by a new Indian brahmachari. In Madras, the three of us got to speaking about how things were going and how they could be organized in a better way. And somehow, although I didn't have as much regular interaction with Prabhupada as the others, they wanted me to write him a letter. Quote, Achyutananda Maharaj, Bhavananda Prabhu, and have met and collectively decided upon a plan, I wrote, based on our limited and imperfect senses and limited knowledge of what has happened in India since we left Delhi, and we put forth these ideas for your divine grace. I know that I'm a great fool, and that the errors of judgment, perception, and logic in this letter are very great, but somehow or other things must go on, and I shall take it as a blessing if you reply to me with your desires, which are coming from the perfect platform, free from illusion, mistakes, and cheating, unlike mine, so I can immediately try to execute that divine will. Still, I felt it is my duty to offer these ideas on behalf of my God brothers in the hopes that some lasting solution can be made for all the problems in India, unquote. Although in retrospect, many of our ideas may have been impractical or inappropriate, Prabhupada praised. I'm very encouraged by your thoughtful plan to organize very nicely all of our men in India. He replied from Bombay, I can understand that you are very eligible to be among the biggest leaders, so I have all confidence in your Madras programs. There appears to be some feelings of dissatisfaction with things that have been managed in India. So I've simply said that if you all get me at 2 life members daily in India, then I shall do the rest. So I am pleased to hear that you're making many life members there. That is the proof of our preaching strength. Wherever there is preaching strength, there is also success, no matter it may be pandal show or making members or traveling Sankirtan party or whatever it may be. Just maintain our strong position of purity, of routine work, and preach and distribute literature. That's all. So far as our program for India at present, we are trying seriously for a nice house in the aristocratic section of Bombay. Otherwise, when funds are there, construct a very nice centers in Vrindavan and Mayapur. That's all. Let many foreign students and disciples come to India for staying with us in these places. We shall be content to sit down there, chant, and have kirtan very vigorously 24 hours. And if anyone wants us, we shall go for a few days and have a program. Our real interest is in the Western countries. The trouble in India is we cannot preach. There are language difficulties, and the people think that they already know everything. But now many foreign tourists are interested to come here to taste the spiritual life. So we shall concentrate on that field. Recently, I've received one letter from Cox and Kings, one of the world's biggest travel agencies, requesting us to kindly assist them by providing facilities for all the tourists coming from foreign places who are interested in seeing the real spiritual life of India. So in this way, we shall work here. Unquote. In the same letter, Prabhupada informed of his plan for the International Mayapur Festival and emphasized the distribution of his books. After the Madras program, we shall all go to Mayapur. I think that Bhavananda and Narayan are organizing a very nice festival there. I am pleased especially to hear that you're distributing many books. Go on increasing books and go increasing my pleasure. You are doing very nicely in Madras. And except for you, I think there's hardly any devotee so hardworking, such good ability to persuade men to help us. And so, the paragraph. And so from Madras, I proceeded to Calcutta and Mayapur for the first Gaura Purnima festival and the cornerstone laying ceremony for the Mayapur temple. Break. We're going to cover another 6 pages, hopefully. Mayapur was mainly rice paddies, with a few temples along the single lane main road. Prabhupada was living in a simple straw hut near the main entrance to our property, and beyond that stood a pandal where the festival and ceremonies would take place. Prabhupada's room had a floor covered with straw mats. When I entered, he was clearly in a grave mood. In a choked voice, with tears in his eyes, he said, Krishna is giving us everything now. Everything is the mercy of Krishna. Paragraph. He called me to his room again later after offering my obeisances. I sat at his feet and explained that when the British were ruling India, they divided the country into 3 provinces, Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta, each ruled by one governor. Prabhupada had never spoken to me about Indian politics or history, and I didn't know where this was all going. But I was fascinated, spellbound, and on to every word, waiting to find out where he was heading. Quote, which one do you want? That was a paragraph. One paragraph. Prabhupada's question left me speechless. I had never made an independent decision about my service. I told him that I would do whatever he wanted. But he did not accept my answer. He wanted me to decide. I asked if I could have time to think about it, and he agreed. I thought, but just couldn't decide. The preaching in Calcutta was good, but Madras also had potential, and I already know people in both places. Then again, Bombay was the biggest field. Actually, all I really wanted was to please Prabhupada. But how? After a few days, Prabhupada drove from Mayapur to the Calcutta temple, and the rest of us followed by bus and train. Once there, I felt that my main service, my assignment, was to determine where I should serve. Whenever I could, I would stand before the beautiful deities of Sri Sri Radhagovind and chant and pray to them for guidance. I soon realized that Prabhupada was forcing me to come to a higher level of Krishna consciousness. As he sometimes, there are three classes of disciples. The third class receives an instruction from the spiritual master, gets it, or neglects to act upon it, or argues. Second class disciple receives instruction from the spiritual master and executes it perfectly. And the first class disciple, what the spiritual master wants and does it even without being told. To obey the spiritual master requires some basic submission, but to know the desire of the spiritual master without being told requires much more spiritual. I was being compelled to become sincere enough and pure enough to hear the Guru in the heart. But although I thought and prayed, no answer came. Where did Prabhupada want me to serve? Not knowing what else to do, I divided to get Prabhupada to reveal his desire. So one day, sitting before him in his room, I ventured that I decided to go to Bombay. Prabhupada's response, committal. That's all right. His face was inscrutable. But again, preaching and potential in Madras is very good. I continued, whether by word or gesture or facial expression, he would indicate his approval or disapproval. Once more, he simply replied, "That's all right." But then again, I said I was thinking of staying in Calcutta. That's all right. How could I trick Srila Prabhupada? I felt ashamed, trying to cheat my spiritual master. But I also felt exhilarated. Spiritual master was so great and perfect that he could not be fooled. When, after five Calcutta, Prabhupada left for Vrindavan and Bombay, I continued to ponder my situation. If I go back to Madras, I considered, I can preach on my own, but if I stay in Calcutta, I can teach others to preach also. That was better. So I crossed Madras off the list. Finally, after many days, if the answer came, I should go to Bombay. The most important program in India was membership. Srila Prabhupada had written, "If you all get me at least 2 life members daily, I shall do the rest." And he was pleased that I was making so many life members, but many members were up in arms against us because we given them everything we had promised. We're making life members, I reasoned, but we were not taking care of them. But were we taking care of them? If we took nice care of them, then they would be so pleased themselves make more life members. But if we neglected them, they would feel cheated, be kill of us. Then, even when we ourselves approached people, they would not agree. I felt I should go to Bombay and organize the life membership program on an all India basis. Prabhupada, my conclusion. Since Bombay had the most life members and was our head office, I should come and, if required, take care of the life members and attend to other affairs related to the head office. Prabhupada seemed pleased. I am very glad to inform you that today we have laid down the cornerstone of our Bombay Center here in Juhu, he replied, and the ceremony was very wonderful with many important people attending. I am glad that you are doing so nicely in Calcutta by making many life members daily. So now I think you should join me in Bombay immediately, as soon as you are free, after training up a competent replacement there. We have also a few days back laid a cornerstone for our Vrindavan temple, and they have given many more rooms at Radha Damodar temple for our use. The program now in Bombay, immense task, so I'm very much encouraged that you feel yourself enthusiastic to help me way by taking a bold lead for pushing on this movement here. Now, Brahmananda is in charge here, and there is a huge land and occupying it in tents and small cottages like the Mayapur cottage, and the work is immense. Gargamuni is collecting also not less than 2 life members daily, but his collection goes towards our Vrindavan construction work. Things are not going very nice in Nairobi because Brahmananda has left, so I shall have to send him back there tomorrow. Therefore, I wanted that you should come here to assist Madhudvisa by collecting, and I think there will be no difficulty here because there is such rich population. Madhavananda, whom I had been training, can go to Mayapur, from Mayapur to Calcutta to help Madhavananda collect there, and you should come here at the earliest possible, at the latest, by 27th March, 1972. Bhavananda arranged for my ticket, and within days I reached Bombay. I rode from the train station with eager anticipation, but the suburb of Juhu seemed far away. As we got closer, the area struck me as remote, covered with trees and poorly lit. But when I saw a post on trees and a lamppost advertising our Hare Krishna festival, and Prabhupada's talk heart leaped. And when I saw signs with arrows pointing the way to the site, my excitement increased. But the long, lonely lanes in Juhu to never end, and I wondered when we would ever get there. Suddenly we came to a green, lush expanse of land dotted with coconut palms and other trees. To the property was a large, festive pandal decorated with blue and white trim, with a stage holding a set of deities facing away from the street. And in the back, beyond the open land, was a cluster of 2-story apartment buildings. As much as I was looking to meeting all the devotees and getting settled, I wanted to see Srila Prabhupada as soon as possible. I was told that he was sitting at Mr. Padmanabha Acharya with him on the ground floor of one of the buildings of the property. The devotees were living in tents. And I put my trunk and other things into one, and we went to see my spiritual master. When Prabhupada, he opened his eyes wide, smiled broadly, and said everything else is. He was excited about the whole Juhu project and wanting me to see the property. He stood up and personally escorted me around, walking next to me. By the way, he pointed out all the coconut palms. There were 140 of them, and told me how desirable the location was, being so close to Juhu Beach. Even after seeing everything, however, I still couldn't quite visualize what the place would become. But Prabhupada said, one day, this land with the buildings will be worth 1 crore of rupees. In those days, 1 crore or 10 million rupees was unimaginable for us. All we had in the bank were a few thousand, at most 2 or 3 lakhs. And that was the result of 1.5 years of work. Another 2 pages. There's a break. He's returning from a walk with Prabhupada and a small group of devotees one morning. Madhudvisa pointed to the property and exclaimed, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, they have Disneyland. Call this the Hare Krishna land." And that's how the Juhu property got named, Hare Krishna land. Like the famous American theme park, we too had a major center of attraction, but instead the central figure being a cartoon character, it would be the chanting of Hare Krishna. Prabhupada asked me to come to assist Madhudvisa But when I arrived, I heard that Madhvisa was not doing well, semicolon. He was sleeping late, going to the beach, generally not performing his duties as a temple president. Finally, Prabhupada concluded that Australia would be a good field for him. He would have more opportunity to perform Sankirtan there, and Prabhupada expected he would regain his enthusiasm. With Brahmananda soon returning to Africa and Madhvisa to Australia, Prabhupada had to find someone to fill the position. He called a meeting with his senior disciples. I was present, but more, I thought, as an observer. I was not among the more senior or important devotees, and I had never had a say in such matters. To begin, Prabhupada raised, "So, who will take charge?" No one said a word. The atmosphere was charged with anxious uncertainty. From behind his low table, Prabhupada looked up at the group, then directly at me. "So, Giriraj," he said, "you will take charge?" I was stunned. Silent. I didn't know what to say. This was not at all what I had been expecting. In fact, it was the last thing I could have imagined. I had come to Bombay to preach and develop life membership, and had neither the inclination nor any special ability to manage. This project was on a whole other level, and the responsibility seemed too much for me. Still, I knew that obeying and pleasing the spiritual master was the secret of success in Krishna consciousness. Somehow, I managed to stammer, "Well, Srila Prabhupada, if you want me to, I will." I didn't feel comfortable with the idea, but I couldn't refuse. "Yes," he exclaimed with a bright smile. A day later, I went into Prabhupada's room and sat down in front of his desk. "So now, Giriraj," he began, "the whole responsibility is on you." I winced and he chuckled. I couldn't understand why Prabhupada was laughing. Didn't he know how I felt? He seemed to be rubbing it in. I rarely had such thoughts about the spiritual master. Sir, why thinking like this? I asked myself. But I was also wondering, how could God be so insensitive? I am reluctant to take this responsibility, and he is rubbing it in and saying, "Now it's all on you." And on top of that, he's laughing. At the same time, I understood that the spiritual master could discern what was best for his disciple, and in all my experience with Prabhupada, I knew that he must have foreseen that my taking responsibility for the project would be good for me, even though that was hard for me to imagine. One more page. I just had to surrender. I heard that whatever the spiritual master gave in order, he also gave the potency to execute it. And I knew for the project to be successful, Prabhupada would have to empower me to act on his behalf. Every evening, we did an arti for our Radhakrishna deities on the stage of the pandal. Attracted by the dancing lights and the kirtan booming from the speakers, people would come from throughout the surrounding area and park their cars around our property and alongside the road, and Prabhupada would speak to an assembly of about 100. On Prabhupada's last night at the pandal, he spoke about the six Goswamis' feelings of separation from Krishna. I could tell that he was addressing the devotees and that the visitors would not be able to understand, but he had spoken to them for half an hour, and now he was speaking to us. He quoted the last verse of Sad Goswami Astika, Avrajadevi K, etc. As Prabhupada spoke, I began to see what he was doing. He would soon be leaving Bombay. And knowing that we would be feeling separation from him, he was preparing us the mood of service in that state. Powerless to stop myself, I began to cry. So we'll continue from there tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. He's a good writer, huh?